I'm Laura Murdoch, and I'm a glass blower, and I've been working in glass for about 25 years. I was always, prior to that, I was always a maker, a really prolific maker of things in all different kinds of media. And I liked pretty glass. One day I decided I would just take a glass course. I didn't even know what glass blowing was, and I wasn't particularly passionate about it. And so I applied to a place called Pilchuck Glass School, which is quite a pivotal glass making facility. People come from all over the world to go to it. It's in the Pacific Northwest. And as a beginner, you're entered into a lottery. And I got in. My chances were about 1 in 10, and I got in, which was great. And while I was there, I just met some people from who rented the facility in the winters, a private rental, and they were a really incredible team of glass blowing artists, glass sculpting artists, and they were very welcoming to me. They really folded me in and mentored me and taught me and let me make glass and let me help them, even though I was really not a very good assistant at that point. And the things that they were making were so incredibly inspiring. They made artifacts, I guess I would describe them as artifacts, sculptural artifacts, large artifacts. And one thing that really inspired me about them was that they loved to put patterns on the glass in a variety of ways. And so right away, because I had a love of pattern, that was like an instant fit. And that whole experience in the first year was just absolutely life-changing. And at that point, I became a glass blower and a glass artist, and I just couldn't get enough. Even to this day, I wake up in the morning and I'm probably thinking about glass and what I'm gonna do next in glass. And anyway, because I had their support and encouragement and assistance, I began dreaming very big and very advanced in glass, much ahead of where my skill set was. So, but because I had them there to support me and help me, they really encouraged me to do incredible things that you wouldn't normally do as a beginner, because I had their backing. So it really gave me a lot of, it made a lot of my creative dreams come true, and gave me a lot of confidence about trying things. And of course I got better. My skills developed over the years. 25 years is a long time. And so I began to put these patterns on the glass, and I'll speak to that in a minute about that process. It's lengthy, the description is lengthy. I began to put patterns on the glass, but then I made a lot of those pieces. I had a lot of failures, a lot of experimentation, and I still do. Then one day it occurred to me that I wanted to have more than one pattern on a piece. I wanted a pattern on the inside and a pattern on the outside. And that requires something called the Grawl process, where you make a bubble, not unlike this one. This bubble has numerous patterns on the inside, but envision this small, with a very thin layer of glass powder on the outside of it, cooled down to room temperature, and then you can put resist on in certain places and then hit it with a sandblaster. And so the sandblaster takes away the color glass powder on the outside where the resist isn't. But where the resist is, it leaves the powder. So on this outside layer, these darker stripes, that was the color of the glass powder on the outside, and the more pale stripes are where the sandblaster was able to take away the pieces. So the resist was covering these dark purple lines. Anyway, so you can do that, and then you heat what's called the grawl back up in a kiln and stick it back on your pipe, and get more clear glass over it, and then another new layer of glass powder in a different color. Cool it down to room temperature, put your resist on, figure out what your pattern is going to be, peel away the parts that you want the sandblaster to remove, and do that again. So what I've learned about myself through this process is just the more complicated I can make it, the more layers that are in it, the more I like it and am passionate about it. And the only thing that limits me is the weight of the glass. At some point, the weight gets prohibitive. Like this weight, this is probably about 20 pounds, 15 to 20 pounds. It's very thick. I want it to be thick because I want the different layers to be seen, and I want to be able to cut through the final product and look down and see the layers. So here we have a layer of pink dots, and then there's a second layer where you can see it's really fizzy bubbles. That's a process of dipping the glass in baking soda and water. And then the third layer is the red. And the fourth layer on this one, it was just a creative choice on my part. I just left it clear. I didn't actually want to do anything to it. But I have been known to make 4 layers of pattern. And the only thing that stops me from making 5 is the weight. Because not only is it 15 to 20 pounds on the end of your pipe, it's a 5-foot long pipe, and the glass is liquid for a portion of time. It's kind of a frightening portion of time when you've got that much glass on the end of your pipe. Yeah, so anyway, the grawl process is my favorite thing to do. And this body of work's been in my mind since I started hanging out with the William Morris team. And it just very slowly grew in my mind, but it was quite a while before I could actually get the processes going. And sometimes the inner layers, that particular small grawl might be 5 years old. I have all kinds of grawls in my studio at different stages. And so one piece might evolve over many years. I think this one probably took 3. Because it's just more efficient to do, a lot of small grawls and then pick them all up on the same day, get your new layer of clear glass, get your new color, cool them all down, and just do that sort of, if I could call it, assembly line process instead of just working on one piece at a time. Because one piece goes in the hot shop, you have to go in the hot shop 2, 3, 4, 5 separate times on separate days. So that's a very long-winded explanation of how it all happens. Sometimes I cut. What is the final grawl is still in a bubble shape. It's maybe a bit more blown out, but then I cut and polish so that you can look down and see all the different things going on. So this one has red swirls on the inside. Oh, sorry, it has purple dots on the inside, then it has red swirls, and then it has a raspberry, opaque raspberry on the outside. So that one's got 3. This one has the same thing, but it's just been blown out a little bit more. And this one, the last thing I did was sandblast it. This one, the last thing I did was blow it, and that's why it doesn't have the hard edge that this one does from the sandblaster. This is all melted in. These pieces are probably the most simple pieces of this body of work, and they really only have one color. Well, I guess this one has 2, but they have one pattern on the outside. So that's really where I started with this, and started right at the beginning of my glass career many, many years ago. But it's still a big seller for me, and I still really like doing it, whether or not the pattern is complicated or simple. And then I kind of left that for a while, and I moved into these more sculptural pieces, and continued with all my layering ideas and assembling these objects together so that they looked like genie bottles. I did that for quite a few years. I'm still doing it. But at that point, you can see that there are a couple of layers in each one. This one has dots on the inside and a raspberry on the outside. This one has the same, marini dots on the inside, color on the outside. And I think it was at that point that I realized, oh, I would really like to make smaller, heavier objects with many, many layers, like more than two. And so that's when these thicker, heavier pieces started to come about. I didn't really want it to be as much about blowing something out large. I wanted it to be more about seeing the layers right next to each other. And so then I moved from that to, let's see, this one is the next stage of simplicity, I would say, with just 2 layers of glass pattern in it. And then the rest, this is actually a really good example. The rest have at least 3 layers. So when you look at this piece, do you have a good view of it? Mm-hmm. So you can see inside, along the rim and just inside here, there are pink diamonds. So that was the first small baby grawl that I made. I call the first stage my baby grawls. Then, many months later, I gathered more clear glass over top, and I put orange powder on it, and that's the swirly part inside. And then probably many months or maybe years went by, and then I picked that up and got more glass over top and got the red over the top. But I do recall with this one the realization that I might not be able to lift as much glass as I wanted to. Mm-hmm. I have actually hired other people to help me to make them bigger with an additional layer. But it's a risk. It's fraught with risk, because these colors, well, for many reasons, I've had a lot of breakage. Probably 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 pieces has broken along the way, cracked, or for whatever reason. Sometimes the colors don't like each other. Sometimes the glass doesn't like the process because you're heating it up and cooling it down so many times. And so there's just a lot of risk. And so the more layers there are, the more layers there are, the more crushing it is when it doesn't work out. Because at that point, you've not only spent dozens of hours of your time, but it's also very expensive, because you've probably been in the hot shop on 3 or 4 different days with an assistant, with a paid assistant, at least one. So it's really hard when it doesn't work out. They do make me a little bit nervous, because they're so, they're heavy, so that if they were to tip over, they might hurt someone, or drop on someone's foot, or just roll off and break. That's the nature of that shape. Sometimes I like to lay a piece on its side so that people can look in more and really see what's going on in there. Like I didn't make this piece with a way to do this, but I had thought about letting it be viewed at that angle just so you can look in and see. Over the years, all my work has of course evolved. It's evolved in skill. It's evolved in the number of different techniques I'm bringing in to a piece. It's evolved in size, but it's really, there's a common thread that has come right from the beginning, and that was, I always loved pattern, and I would put pattern on any surface I could find. Paper, ceramics, beading, just all kinds of things. And I'm still doing it. I'm just doing more of it and more layers of it in one piece. So this is kind of the culmination, I would say, of that serious, intricate layering of pattern. It's the most patterning that I've done yet. So I'm not exactly sure where I'll go with it quite yet next, but I'm pretty sure it will involve pattern.
Why are you so drawn to patterns?
I don't know, to be honest, but it's really a forceful thing in me. I can't ignore a pattern. I can't ignore a repeating pattern, and I see them everywhere, you know, whether it's on a rug or patterns in nature. I couldn't really explain it, but I know when I see it, I'm instantly drawn to it, and I usually photograph it so that I can later be inspired by that. So working during COVID was, well, it's not past tense, is quite difficult. Fortunately, the hot shop is open again. It was closed for a long time, but I also was isolated in New York City, and most of my glass and supplies was in Vancouver, and so I couldn't really have access to it, and it was really, really difficult because I suddenly had all this time and no better opportunity really to take the time to make and create lots of work, but I wasn't able to, so that was a bummer. And that resulted in a very tight timeline in getting ready for this show, because normally for a show like this I would be thinking about it a year in advance, and I would be, you know, just making a round of baby grawls and then you know, inching each piece to the finish line. And I had done a fair bit of that, and that's what saved me in the end, but I had to really compress the timeline of getting the work ready, which was interesting, difficult, but so rewarding when it all comes together. And so during COVID, I got a commission, which I'm working on right now. It's a really large piece, so I am having to hire someone else to make the piece, but it's going to be quite a giant piece with very, very intricate patterning on it. So I'll be actually blowing that on Thursday, and it'll probably take me about a month to pattern it. But it will only have one pattern, just one layer of color on the outside. I think light is central to the layering process, because if you don't have, I've always been really impacted by light shining through glass because it so totally illuminates it and illuminates the color. But with these layered pieces, there's so much going on, and sometimes the color can be really dense, that if you don't have light shining into it, you really don't see anything. It just kind of looks like a mass of glass. I think containment, I've always been really, really drawn to vessels rather than sculptural glass. And I love the idea of containment, yet the air flows through. It allows the light in. More so in my larger embellished pieces, I think containment is definitely a factor. Those pieces remind me of genie lamps, Aladdin's lamp, you know, the kind of a kind of vessel where a being might reside till you take the lid off.